Welcome to True Crime Case Audio, where we delve into the darkest corners of human nature. Today's episode unravels a tale of husband's secret gay love affair with stepson ends in grisly murder. In the picturesque suburb of Evergreen Hills, nestled just outside of Seattle, Washington, life seemed to move at a leisurely pace. Towering evergreens lined streets dotted with craftsman-style homes, their well-manicured lawns a testament to the pride of ownership that permeated the community. It was here, amid this idyllic setting, that the Donnelly family made their home. A family that, from the outside, appeared to be the very embodiment of the American dream. Richard Donnelly, 54, was a prominent cardiothoracic surgeon at Seattle Grace Hospital, known for his steady hands and innovative techniques. His wife, Caroline Donnelly, 49, was a successful interior designer whose work graced the pages of high-end home magazines. Their blended family included Caroline's son from a previous marriage, Arthur Foster, 26, charismatic young man who had recently passed the bar exam and joined a prestigious law firm in downtown Seattle. The Donnellys were pillars of the Evergreen Hills community. Richard's philanthropic efforts, particularly his work at the local children's hospital, had earned him the admiration of his neighbors. Caroline's design expertise was in high demand, her waiting list stretching months into the future. Arthur, despite his youth, had already made a name for himself in legal circles, partners at his firm predicting a bright future for the ambitious young lawyer. But beneath the polished veneer of their lives, a dark secret festered, one that would ultimately lead to a brutal act that would shatter the peaceful facade of Evergreen Hills forever. The morning of September 12, 2023, dawned crisp and clear. Early autumn air carrying the first hints of the changing season. Neighbors reported seeing Richard leaving for work at his usual time, 6:45 a.m., his silver Mercedes gliding silently down the street. Caroline was spotted an hour later, climbing into her Range Rover with a portfolio of fabric swatches and paint samples. It was a day like any other in Evergreen Hills, until it wasn't. At 3:23 p.m., the emergency services received a frantic 911 call from Caroline Donnelly. Her voice, usually poised and articulate, was barely recognizable as she begged for help. "Please, you have to come quickly." Sobbed. "There's so much blood. Oh God, Richard. Arthur, please hurry." First responders arrived at 1742 Maple Grove Lane within minutes. Officer Michael Chen, a 5-year veteran of the Evergreen Hills Police Department, was the first to enter the Donnelly residence. The scene that greeted him would haunt him for years to come. In the spacious living room, with its vaulted ceilings and panoramic windows overlooking the lush backyard, lay the bodies of Richard Donnelly and Arthur Foster. The once pristine hardwood floors were now stained a deep crimson, the metallic scent of blood hanging heavy in the air. Richard lay face down near the grand piano, a heavy crystal award, a recognition of his surgical excellence, lying shattered beside him. Arthur's body was slumped over the leather sectional, his unseeing eyes staring at the ceiling. The violence of the scene was at stark odds with the tranquil suburban setting. Family photos smiled down from the walls, silent witness to the carnage below. A half-empty cup of artisanal coffee sat on the side table, still warm to the touch, a mundane detail that only served to emphasize the shocking nature of the crime. As more officers arrived and the area was cordoned off, Detective Samantha Reeves took charge of the investigation. With 15 years of experience under her belt, Reeves had seen her fair share of gruesome crime scenes. But even she was taken aback by the savagery on display in the Donnelly home. The initial examination revealed that both Richard and Arthur had suffered multiple stab wounds. The murder weapon, a high-end chef's knife with a 10-inch blade, was found discarded in the nearby guest bathroom, carelessly wiped clean, but still bearing traces of blood. Caroline Donnelly was found in the kitchen, her designer outfit splattered with blood, her hands shaking as she clutched a bottle of expensive red wine. She appeared to be in a state of shock, alternating between bouts of hysterical crying and eerie calm. Detective Reeves gently led her away from the scene, her mind already racing with questions. As news of the murders spread, the residents of Evergreen Hills found themselves grappling with a range of emotions: shock, Such a violent act could occur in their peaceful community. Fear. Perhaps they weren't as safe as they had always believed. And curiosity. A morbid fascination with the details of the crime that would soon consume local gossip circles. The investigation began in earnest. Forensics teams combed through the Donnelly home, collecting evidence and taking photographs. Neighbors were interviewed, their statements painting a picture of a family that seemed, on the surface at least, be living the American dream. But as Detective Reeves and her team dug deeper, cracks began to appear in the Donnellys' perfect facade. Interviews with colleagues and friends revealed tensions within the family that had gone unnoticed by casual observers. Dr. Amelia Patel, a fellow surgeon who had worked alongside Richard for over a decade, spoke of recent changes in his behavior. Richard had always been so focused, so driven, she told investigators, but in the past few months, he seemed distracted. There were times I'd catch him staring off into space during consultations, or checking his phone obsessively between surgeries. It wasn't like him at all. Caroline's best friend and fellow designer, Olivia Rodriguez, painted a picture of a woman struggling to maintain her composure in the face of mounting stress. Caroline always prided herself on having everything under control, Olivia explained. But lately, she'd been drinking more than usual. There were days she'd show up to client meetings with sunglasses on, and I could smell the wine on her breath. I tried to talk to her about it, but she just brushed me off, saying everything was fine. As for Arthur, his colleagues at the law firm described a young man who seemed to be living two separate lives. By day, he was the consummate professional, sharp, articulate, and driven. But there were whispers of wild parties, of nights spent in exclusive clubs where discretion was paramount and judgment was checked at the door. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Detective Reeves received an anonymous tip. A USB drive was left at the police station, its contents protected by high-level encryption. When the cybercrime unit finally cracked the security, what they found sent shockwaves through the investigation team. The drive contained hundreds of emails, text messages, and photos documenting a secret relationship between Richard Donnelly and his stepson Arthur Foster. Correspondence painted a picture of a passionate affair that had been going on for nearly 3 years, hidden from the world behind a veneer of family normalcy. The emails revealed a relationship that was as intense as it was forbidden. Richard wrote of his guilt, his fear of discovery, but also of a love he couldn't deny. Arthur's messages were filled with a mixture of adoration and resentment, pushing for more while simultaneously expressing anger at their need for secrecy. As the investigation progressed, a timeline began to emerge. It appeared that the affair had begun shortly after Arthur's college graduation, during a family trip to their vacation home in the San Juan Island. What started as a drunken encounter had evolved into a full-blown relationship, the two men stealing moments together whenever they could. The strain of maintaining their secret had clearly taken its toll on both men. Richard's colleagues had noticed his distraction, his sudden mood swings. Arthur's friends spoke of his increasing isolation, his reluctance to date or form close relationships with others his age. But it was Caroline who had borne the brunt of their deception. Friends and family described a woman who had become a shadow of her former self. Her drinking had increased, her work had suffered, and there were rumors of explosive arguments behind the closed doors of 1742 Maple Grove Lane. The question that haunted investigators was, who knew? Had Caroline discovered her husband's betrayal? Had someone else stumbled upon their secret, using it as leverage? The answers, it seemed, lay in the final hours before the murders. Surveillance footage from a high-end coffee shop near the Donnelly home showed Richard's car pulling in at 2:07 p.m. on the day of the murders. He appeared agitated, pacing back and forth while waiting for his order. At 2:13 p.m., Arthur entered the frame. Two men had a brief but clearly heated conversation before leaving in separate cars. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from the Donnelly home around 2:45 p.m. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, a 78-year-old retiree who lived next door, told police she had heard what sounded like an argument, followed by a loud crash and then silence. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Detective Reeves found herself grappling with a case that was far more complex than a simple domestic dispute gone wrong. The relationships between Richard, Arthur, and Caroline were a tangled web of love, betrayal, and secret. A powder keg that had finally exploded with devastating consequences. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. A routine check of local high-end jewelry stores turned up a custom-made platinum wedding band that had been sold the day before the murders. The ring was identified as belonging to Richard Donnelly, and security footage showed Arthur as the one who had sold it. This discovery led investigators back to Caroline Donnelly for another round of questioning. Under the weight of mounting evidence, Caroline's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. In a tearful confession, she revealed the events that had led to the tragic deaths of her husband and son. Caroline had suspected the affair for months, noticing the lingering glances, the hushed phone conversations, the unexplained absences. But it wasn't until she found Richard's wedding ring missing that her suspicions were confirmed. In a fit of rage, she had confronted them both, demanding answers. The argument that ensued was explosive. Years of pent-up resentment, guilt, and anger came pouring out. In the heat of the moment, Caroline had grabbed the knife, lashing out first at Richard and then at Arthur when he tried to intervene. It was only after the deed was done that the full weight of her actions had come crashing down upon her. As news of Caroline's confession spread, the community of Evergreen Hills found itself grappling with a tragedy that defied easy explanation. The case had exposed the dark underbelly of suburban life, forcing residents to confront uncomfortable truths about the secrets that can lurk behind closed doors. In the weeks and months that followed, Evergreen Hills struggled to come to terms with what had happened. The Donnelly home stood empty, a silent reminder of the lives that had been destroyed. Neighbors who had once prided themselves on their close-knit community now eyed each other with suspicion, wondering what other secrets might be hiding behind manicured lawns and picture-perfect smiles. The trial of Caroline Donnelly became a media sensation, drawing attention from across the country. As details of the affair between Richard and Arthur came to light, public opinion was sharply divided. Some saw Caroline as a victim, a woman driven to the brink by her husband's betrayal. Others condemned her actions, arguing that nothing could justify the taking of two lives. In the end, Caroline was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. As she was led from the courtroom, the once proud interior designer was a shell of her former self. Her designer clothes replaced by a prison jumpsuit, her carefully maintained appearance now haggard and worn. The aftermath of the Donnelly case left an indelible mark on Evergreen Hills. The community that had once prided itself on its safety and stability was forced to confront the reality that even the most picture-perfect facades can hide dark secrets. Support groups sprang up, offering a space for residents to discuss their feelings and come to terms with what had happened. The local school system implemented new programs focusing on mental health and healthy relationships. The Evergreen Hills Police Department, under fire for missing the warning signs, underwent a complete overhaul of its community outreach programs. As the years passed, the shock of the Donnelly murders gradually faded, but its impact lingered. New families moved into the neighborhood, drawn by the same promises of suburban tranquility that had once attracted the Donnellys. But there was a newfound awareness among residents, a recognition that true community meant more than just keeping up appearances. The Donnelly house at 1742 Maple Grove Lane stood empty for years, a silent monument to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Eventually, it was purchased by a nonprofit organization and converted into a community center, offering counseling services and support groups for families in crisis. In the end, the case of the Donnelly family became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the destructive power of secrets and the importance of honesty in relationships. It served as a wake-up call for many, prompting difficult but necessary conversations about love, acceptance, and the complexities of human desire. As for Detective Samantha Reeves, the case continued to haunt her long after it was closed. She found herself returning to Evergreen Hills from time to time, driving past 1742 Maple Grove Lane, remembering the day when the illusion of suburban perfection had been shattered forever. In her darker moments, Reeves wondered how many other homes in Evergreen Hills, or in any other seemingly idyllic community, might be hiding their own painful secret. It was a thought that both troubled and motivated her, driving her to approach each new case with renewed dedication and a deeper understanding of the complexities of human nature. The Donnelly case may have faded from the headlines, but its impact continued to ripple through the lives of all those it had touched. It stood as a stark reminder that beneath the surface of even the most perfect-seeming lives, there can lurk a world of pain, desire, and desperation. A world that, when exposed to the light of day, has the power to destroy everything in its path. In Evergreen Hills, life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. Children once again played in manicured front yards, neighbors exchanged pleasantries over garden fences, and the annual community festival resumed its place as a highlight of the social calendar. But beneath the renewed veneer of suburban tranquility, a new awareness had taken root. A recognition that true community is built not on appearances, but on compassion, understanding, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The case also sparked broader discussions about societal attitudes towards LGBTQ+ relationships, particularly in conservative suburban communities. Some argued that the tragedy could have been avoided if Richard and Arthur had felt free to be open about their relationship from the beginning. Others countered that the age difference and familial connection made the situation inherently problematic, regardless of gender. Mental health professionals weighed in on the case, discussing the psychological toll of living a double life and the potential consequences of long-term deception on both the individual and their loved one. The Donnelly case became a subject of study in psychology and sociology classes, used as an example of the complex interplay between societal expectations, personal desires, and family dynamics. The legal community, too, found itself grappling with the implications of the case. Debates raged about the adequacy of existing laws in dealing with such complex family situations, and whether Caroline's actions could be considered a crime of passion or premeditated murder. As time passed, the case of the Donnellys took on an almost mythic quality in Evergreen Hills. New residents would hear whispered versions of the tale, each retelling adding layers of speculation and embellishment. The tragedy became a local legend, a case told to reinforce the idea that appearances can be deceiving and that every family, no matter how perfect they might seem, has its own struggles and secret. For those who had known the Donnellys personally, the healing process was slow and painful. Richard's colleagues at the hospital struggled to reconcile the brilliant surgeon they had known with the man who had engaged in a secret affair with his stepson. Arthur's friends from law school grappled with feelings of guilt, wondering if they could have seen signs of his inner turmoil and somehow prevented the tragedy. Caroline's friends, particularly those in the design community, were left to wonder how well they had really known the woman they had called a friend for years. Many found themselves questioning their own relationships, suddenly hyper-aware of the potential for hidden truths, unspoken resentments. The case also had a profound impact on the children of Evergreen Hills. Many who had grown up seeing the Donnellys as role models were forced to confront the harsh realities of adult life far earlier than their parents might have wished. School counselors reported an increase in students seeking help for anxiety and depression in the months following the murders, as young people struggled to make sense of a world that suddenly seemed far less stable and predictable than they had believed. As the years passed, the Donnelly case became a touchstone for the community of Evergreen Hills, a shared experience that both divided and united its residents. Some found their faith in humanity shaken, becoming more guarded and suspicious in their interactions with others. Others, however, were inspired to foster deeper, more authentic connections with their neighbors, recognizing the importance of creating a community where people felt safe to be their true selves. The tragedy also led to changes in local law enforcement practices. The Evergreen Hills Police Department implemented new training programs focused on recognizing signs of domestic distress and intervening before situations escalated to violence. They also increased their community outreach efforts, working to build stronger relationships with residents and encourage open communication about concerns and suspicions. The media coverage of the Donnelly case sparked national conversations about the pressures of maintaining a perfect image in suburban America. Talk shows, documentaries, and news specials explored the dark side of the American dream, questioning whether the pursuit of an idealized lifestyle was worth the potential cost, personal happiness, and authenticity. In the years following the tragedy, several books were written about the Donnelly case. True crime authors delved into the details of the investigation, while psychologists and sociologists used the case as a springboard to explore broader issues of family dynamics, sexuality, and societal expectations. One particularly controversial book, written by a former colleague of Richard's, claimed to have insider knowledge of the affair and painted a sympathetic portrait of the two men, arguing that they were victims of a repressive society. The case also had ripple effects in the legal world. Law schools began using the Donnelly case as a study in the complexities of family law and criminal justice. Debates arose about whether existing laws were adequate to address the nuances of such situations, leading to proposals for legal reforms in some states. For Detective Samantha Reeves, the Donnelly case marked a turning point in her career. She became known as an expert in complex domestic cases and was frequently called upon to consult on similar investigations across the state. The experience had taught her to look beyond surface appearances and to approach each case with a deep awareness of the complicated emotional landscapes that often lay behind closed doors. As for Caroline Donnelly, her life in prison was a stark contrast to the luxury she had once known. She struggled to adjust to her new reality, haunted by the memories of what she had done and the life she had lost. Over time, she began to participate in prison support groups and eventually started working with a therapist to confront the emotional issues that had led to her violent outbursts. The fates of the extended Donnelly and Foster families were also irrevocably altered by the tragedy. Richard's elderly parents, who had been so proud of their successful son, retreated from public life, unable to bear the whispers and pitying looks from their social circle. Arthur's biological father, who had been largely absent from his life, was left to grapple with complex feelings of guilt and loss for the son he had never truly known. In Evergreen Hills, the community center that had once been the Donnelly home became a symbol of resilience and healing. It offered a wide range of services, from counseling for individuals and families to support groups for LGBTQ+ youth struggling with issues of identity and acceptance. The center also hosted community events aimed at fostering open dialogue and understanding among residents. As the 10th anniversary of the tragedy approached, the residents of Evergreen Hills debated how to commemorate the event. Some argued for a quiet, private remembrance, while others pushed for a more public acknowledgement of the impact the case had had on the community. In the end, compromise was reached. A small memorial garden was created in the local park, a simple plaque that read, "In memory of lives lost and a community forever changed. May we continue to grow in understanding and compassion." The case of the Donnellys continued to resonate far beyond the borders of Evergreen Hills. It became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the potential consequences of living a life built on secrets and lies. In college psychology classes, in marriage counseling sessions, in LGBTQ+ support groups, the case was discussed and analyzed, its lessons extracted and applied to a wide range of situations. For many, the tragedy served as a wake-up call, prompting them to examine their own lives and relationships more closely. Couples found themselves having difficult but necessary conversations about honesty and trust. Parents struggled with how to create environments where their children felt safe, being their authentic selves. Community leaders grappled with how to foster a more inclusive and accepting society. In the end, the legacy of the Donnelly case was complex and far-reaching. It had exposed the dark underbelly of suburban life, challenging the notion that outward success and respectability were indicators of inner happiness or moral virtue. It had forced a community, and to some extent a nation, confront uncomfortable truths about sexuality, family dynamics, and the human capacity for both love and violence. But it had also, in its own tragic way, brought about positive change. It had sparked important conversations, fostered greater empathy and understanding, and led to concrete improvements in community support systems and law enforcement practices. As life in Evergreen Hills continued to evolve, the memory of the Donnellys remained, a somber reminder of the fragility of human relationships and the importance of authenticity, compassion, and open communication. Perfectly manicured lawns and beautifully appointed homes still stood as testaments to the community's prosperity. But beneath the surface, there was a new depth of understanding, a recognition that true beauty and strength come not from perfection, from the ability to acknowledge and embrace the complex, messy reality of human existence. And so, as the seasons changed and years passed, the case of the Donnellys became woven into the fabric of Evergreen Hills. Cautionary tale, a catalyst for change, and a persistent reminder that beneath the surface of even the most picture-perfect lives, there lies a world of complexity, struggle, and ultimately humanity. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth exploration of the Donnelly case. We hope this case has provided insight into the complex dynamics that can exist beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. If you found this account compelling, we invite you to watch our next video, where we'll delve into another gripping true crime case that shook a quiet community to its core. Stay tuned for more stories that examine the darker side of human nature and the ripple effects that a single tragic event can have on countless lives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest true crime content. Your support allows us to continue bringing these important stories to light. Until next time, remember that things aren't always as they appear, and compassion can go a long way in understanding the human experience.